Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have a lineup of terrifying encounters to share with you. Before we get into them, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it does matter. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Last night, when I did the second half in regards to crawlers, there was an encounter that had a couple of boys on a trampoline. And I said it kind of reminded me of a Dogman encounter that was two girls camped out on a trampoline. And I hadn't heard the experience in a couple of years. It was a subscriber who reached out to me. Now, her and her friend were sleeping over. Well, her friend was sleeping over at her house. They were on a trampoline, and their backyard was not a really big backyard, not really small, but it was fenced in. And there was a tree in the far corner. So the girls were camped out on their trampoline, pillows, blankets. Their feet were touching. Their heads were opposite end, kind of on the outside bar part of the trampoline. And the girls, or the girl who lived at the home, woke up to a large canine-looking face staring at her and her friend, standing behind her friend, and a large clawed hand coming out of the darkness towards her friend. She ended up grabbing her friend's feet and kind of yanking her back off the trampoline, and they both ran into the home. Her friend didn't see what she saw. It's late at night. The parents are sleeping. The dad and mom are awoken. The girl tells her parents what she saw. Now, the dad is a kind of, rugged guy, hunter, just a really salt of the earth kind of guy. Doesn't fear easily, 2A supporter, and goes out back with, I believe it was a shotgun. And he looks around the yard and he doesn't see anything. And the girl's looking out the back door. Now, this is a small, quiet, rural kind of town. Not a lot of people, not a lot of crime. Everybody doesn't, nobody locks their doors kind of business. And the dad is in the backyard now, and he goes, he looks under the trampoline, looks around, and he kind of goes out to the back area where that one tree kind of sits cornered into the fence area. And she sees her dad look up into the tree. And I think he's got a flashlight. He definitely has his shotgun. And he kind of points the flashlight up in the air, and he takes off running toward the home and goes up the stairs, shuts and locks all the doors of the house, checks the windows, and then refuses to talk about anything after that to the daughter. Now, after that experience, they locked their door. And, they were probably one of the only few families that did lock their door in the neighborhood. Because, like I said, there was no crime hardly. This is before before 2000, before 1990, and in rural America. And so she immediately starts thinking, hey, maybe I didn't imagine this, because at first she thought it was like a bad dream. But she starts putting things together, like I remember seeing this creature standing over my friend, and this huge kind of clawed hand. When we ran, it was kind of gone. Where did it go so fast? And then my dad, who is very brave, very manly man, goes out and looks around, and she sees him running back in. So she now has kind of a validation to what she saw. And it's a very eerie kind of encounter, but it reminded me of, that trampoline experience. And it seems like a lot of kids with trampolines are having kind of some strange encounters. I don't think it's because they're on a trampoline. I think it's because they're outside. Nowadays kids really don't get outside too often. I remember there was an old video, and I've tried to look for it, and I will continue to look for it, but I can't find it anywhere. These kids were in their backyard, and this is a huge backyard. I mean, big. There's a wood line. You can see the wood line further out in the back, and then there's a road kind of out in the front. And, just, gosh, probably 4 acres, I'd say, around the home. Cleared land. They're on this trampoline jumping, and all of a sudden this kind of Dogman or Bigfoot-esque creature steps out of the forest, and they're bouncing. The kid that's on the thing the most, he's bouncing up and looking at it, and finally they all just take off and run inside. So I don't think the trampoline and kids being on the trampoline is a kind of draws them in. I definitely don't think that, but it's very strange how kids see these things, and I think, like I said, I think it's because they're outside. And nowadays kids are not outside as much. They're on their phones playing TikTok, or doing these strange TikTok dances that kind of make them look like they have Tourette a little bit. And so it's just very weird. But anyway, I had remembered mentioning that it reminded me of an encounter, and I sat there after I had uploaded the video, and I was like, what? And it just came to me, and I was like, I got to share that with everybody, because it was a very interesting and terrifying event for, that young girl. And like I said, her friend didn't see it, but heard her screaming. So I don't know. Anyway, let's get into tonight's real terrifying. Well, they're all terrifying, but this one's really kind of captivating and terrifying and mind-blowing. So let's get into it. I saw a thing in or near the woods on 3 separate occasions now, and each time I've seen this thing, it was in a different state along the east coast of America. And each sighting was fleeting. I'm in my 30s now, and the sightings have several years between them. The first time I saw it was when I was in high school, and it is definitely the time I got the longest look at it. The second time was only a glimpse, and I'm pretty sure but not entirely sure it was the same thing. The third time, I got a clear look at it from the distance, but it caught me off guard. I stumbled as I was taking a step and I lost sight of it. I've been calling it a thing because I have no idea what it is, and quite honestly, I don't have a good guess either. It's not a Sasquatch, a wild man, a lizard person, or any other creature I've found through my incredibly frustrating recent internet search on this subject matter. Maybe a shapeshifter of some sort, because the first time I saw it, this thing changed its form for sure. If you are someone like me that relies on science for validation, you try to keep an open mind, but you also tend to explain away people's paranormal encounters for any number of different reasons. Also, I would have expected that if I did end up seeing something otherworldly, it might be something that someone else had seen before, right? I might see something I recognize from the television or movies, and I may say, "Look up there, it's a UFO," or "Oh my God, a ghost," or "A Bigfoot, kill it." This thing, though, it's so surreal and so deranged looking, I'm really at a loss. My first sighting was in southern New Hampshire, 2000 or 2001, summer, and well after midnight. I'm going to take some time to explain the first encounter in as much detail as I can recall, even though it happened so fast, literally lasting in total maybe 10 seconds. It is still the longest amount of time I have spent truly looking at this thing. I was walking to a friend's house from the apartment complex I lived in late at night. To get from one place to another quickly, you had to cut through a small patch of forest, roughly 100 yards, that was technically someone else's property. A couple of times before, we had someone shine a light on us, and once he fired a shot into the air to try and scare us in an attempt to get us to stop cutting through. It never did work, though. It did, however, teach me to be stealthier while cutting through, and on this night I was creeping very quietly through the trees as I went. The forest was in a valley between my apartment complex, some houses, and the neighborhood where my friend lived. The valley dipped down in the middle with a steep incline surrounding it. And so at first I had to go down into the valley, and then at the end I would walk up out of the valley, exiting the tree line right on the street where his house is. Once exiting the tree line, one would be standing on the side of the street, with the end of the road about a half a mile to your right, and the entrance to the neighborhood about the same distance on the left. The houses were spaced apart decently, so the night was very dark except for the area around the houses and a couple of light circles under the orange streetlights, of which there were very few for an amount of space. I got through the valley with no problem this time, and I got up some speed to go up the hill in front of me from the forest, ended maybe 5 feet from the edge of the street, if the event was that far. At that exact moment, I came out of the tree line and onto the edge of the road. Something caught my eye to the left of me emerging from the woods across the street. It stumbled awkwardly out of the dark woods and into view right at the edge of the circle of the orange light, radiating down from one of the streetlights. At first, for just a brief moment, it looked like a shadow. However, I heard sound coming from the dead leaves beneath its feet, and I quickly realized that this was no shadow. Its body shape was like a starving child, maybe 3 feet tall, that you may see in a third world country, but its legs and arms were so thin that there appeared to be no way it could support the creature's body weight. It was dark, from what I can remember. At the ends of its frail-looking limbs were just nubs. No hands or feet that I saw. Its movements were the creepiest part, honestly, and they were the first thing that threw me off. I can't even really explain how absurd and unnatural its movements were, or how it was standing on those tiny legs. It moved forward from the trees and toward the street extremely awkwardly, with a couple of steps that I saw it take. It was almost as if it was not supposed to be walking around like that, but it had somehow figured out a way to do so regardless. The thing was roughly 2 to 3 feet tall, with an enlarged light bulb shaped head and a little belly in spite of how thin the rest of its frame was. In addition to its shape and motion, the thing seemed unreal, mostly because it didn't seem to reflect any light at all when it stepped into the light of the street lamp. It appeared to have no three-dimensional form at all, with its body almost blending right into its shadow. And I could only really tell it had solid form by the way it moved and navigated the environment around it. I froze in place instantly when I saw it. With my brain unable to even process what I was looking at, in a couple of steps it exited the tree, stumbled across the patch of grass to the street, and then sort of fumbled down forward toward the sewer drain on the side of the road. I'm not sure what I did, if anything, but as soon as it hit the curb, it rose back up and looked over at me. I couldn't see its face or anything at all, just this bizarre black shape, moving so unbelievably awkward. I really cannot stress this enough. Its movements were ridiculously uncoordinated. What happened next is what sent me fleeing back into the woods with all of the cowardness that has kept me alive to this day. Upon seeing me, this malformed shadow child thing did this quick twisted turn toward me, dropped down on all fours, and became much more animal-like shape when it did. I again have no idea how to describe the motion, as it was so unnatural. But when its turn was complete, the thing had become something I can only describe as a shadow dog, cat, bear. I know that sounds crazy, but I can't describe it in any other way. It stood on all fours like a predatory animal, but I could not make out any definition on it, with the way it didn't catch the light that it was standing directly underneath. This thing, it didn't just go from being human-like to being a human on all fours. I mean, it genuinely became something else as far as I can tell. I have debated leaving this next part out because it just slices into the credibility of the events even further, but it happened, and here goes. As soon as the creature had hit all fours and was no longer humanoid, its eyes flashed yellow at me, and it let out this loud shriek. Not a growl, not a bark, not a snarl, not an animal-like roar or even a hissing, but a legitimate shriek that sounded neither a person nor an animal could make. The sound started quietly, then rose quickly, almost as if it was winding up or under pressure, and just painfully being forced out of the creature's mouth in great anguish. Its scream had a certain harshness to it, as if it might have had something seriously wrong with its vocal cords, or it had just smoked a million cigarettes consecutively. I remember the thing had a weird, almost scared vulnerability to the sound it made, which contrasted the harshness and tone as well as the defensive stance the creature took. All this took place in just a few seconds, maybe 10 at the most, from the time the thing exited the tree line to the time it turned, postured, shrieked at me, and sent me running without a single thought in my head right back into the woods. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I didn't try to be quiet through that forest. I just ran as fast as I could. That's correct. I was so scared, I ran back into the dark, scary woods to get away, only realizing how dumb that was sometime afterward. The sound it made chilled me to my core then, but now in hindsight, I think the flashing eyes bother me more than the sound because it seems so expected. The flashing, glowing eyes trope is precisely what I've heard in so many other people's experiences I never believed about mysterious creatures they claim to have encountered. I mean, because that's what scary things in the night do, right? They flash yellow eyes and make scary shrieking sounds at you. Obviously, what else are they going to do? I never made it to my friend's house that night, and I never mentioned this to anyone ever since. I managed to forget about it pretty quickly, although I'm not sure how. My life was high drama at the time, so I'm not sure it was because I did something stupid that took over my world. The second sighting was in Central Florida, 2006 in the spring, probably 8 p.m. The second sighting is much briefer, and as I mentioned before, I'm 90% sure it was the same thing, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll keep it short and tell you simply that I was out camping, went for a walk along a trail, watched my girlfriend hop from rock to rock across the river. I heard a sound to my left, and when I turned to look, I saw an extremely thin, skinny, black nubbed leg, possibly a tail, disappear behind a tree, as if an animal was running away from something. I ran over this time, but I found nothing, and I didn't mention it to my girlfriend. No experiences or weird sounds that night, and no more encounters for several years. And the third sighting was in the eastern shore of Virginia, June 8, 2019, roughly 11 p.m. I was at a party at a friend's house celebrating her birthday because she's one of those people in their 30s that still gets excited about those things. I don't drink, so I was not drunk, but in the interest of total transparency, I've been known to partake in the occasional medicinal herbal supplement for recreational purposes. You can take that information how you like. My friend lives with her husband in a farmhouse surrounded by open fields for a couple of acres in each direction, surrounded, of course, by thick forest. I'd been there for a while, and the thing was the furthest thing from my mind. We were all just hanging out, rambling on about the usual insane crap. I decided I wanted to smoke, so I went out the front door onto the porch. I stepped forward and went to step down the front steps to get a little more space, and as I did, I glanced up and out into the field in front of the house. There it was, roughly 50 yards out and bumbling through the field toward the trees. For a split second, I could see the unmistakable shape of this weird shadow child thing. It was just the same as before. Large head and belly, unbelievably thin arms and legs, and again, reflecting absolutely no light at all. I was in mid-step when I glanced up and lost track of where I was stepping, causing me to fall forward. I managed to catch myself as I fell barely, and I must have made a sound when I did it because, when I looked back up, the thing was on all fours, quickly running like a dog off into the woods. I reiterate this. This thing did not move on all fours like a person in any way, but it moved like an animal with knees bent backwards. I was too far, and it happened too fast for me to tell if it had hands or feet this time. I started to walk out and look around a bit when someone came outside, and not wanting to tell anyone, I just went back to the party. I must have been distant the rest of the night because I couldn't get it out of my head this time. I ended up leaving the party relatively early and went home to start obsessing about this, as I've been for a while now. So I am sufficiently freaked out by a lot of things about what I've seen, even discounting the second sighting. I got two brief but good looks at something that I cannot explain. One of the things that bothers me the most about this is why me? Why, as far as I know, have I been the only one to see this thing? If it knows of me and is following me or something like that, then why does it seem surprised by my presence each time I've seen it, and then enter a sort of fight or flight mentality? If it doesn't know me, then why am I the only one that is seeing this thing, and now in 3 different states years apart? I have so many questions. What I saw that night was so unnatural, I never expected to see anything like it in my life. It honestly did not belong in our physical reality, and it almost didn't seem to fit in the environment around it, as if it's something 2D superimposed into an authentic 3D background. I looked into shadow people, and I don't think that's what it was. There was nothing ghostly about what I saw. It was there and had solid form. This thing is so out of place, but at the same time, I saw it there and heard it as well. I don't know what else to say about it. Each time, except the second, I could see enough of it that I could tell it was not somebody messing with me. And I could see enough of it to say it did not belong here in this world with us. My best guess at some point is that it and I crossed each other's paths in a possible interdimensional rift or time slip, only because of how surreal the experience was. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's all I have to come up with to rationalize the fact that this thing did not fit into the surroundings in any way. It didn't even look like it was made to move or get around in this world. The force of gravity should have for sure crushed its skinny legs under the weight of its body. It was like an eggplant on toothpicks. I know what I saw, and I cannot get the way this thing moved or how dark it was out of my mind. Update. This latest encounter took place on Friday, August 5th, 2019, at approximately 7:30 p.m. as I was walking from my Jeep to the duplex I live in after getting back home from work. The sun was setting behind me as I pulled into a short driveway in front of my house. The sun had gone down to the point where it was below the treetops, yet still not at the horizon. So there was still some ambient light left in the day. It was incredibly hot that day, pushing 100, and it had only cooled off a little bit by that point, with the humidity still at 100%. My neighborhood is lower middle class, so all the houses are small, but there is a bit of space between each of them, giving everyone a little bit of elbow room at least. The street I live on is a cut-through between two parts of our small town. So even though we are pretty rural, the road out front actually gets pretty busy sometimes. My place is just a few yards off the street, and I have a backyard that extends about 20 feet behind the building before stopping abruptly at a patch of trees dividing my neighbor's lawn from mine. As usual, I parked in the gravel about 20 feet from the edge of my screened-in patio, where my girlfriend was sitting on the porch swinging. She gets off of work much earlier than I do, and she is usually there with a drink in hand each weekday when I get home. None of this seems relevant. I'm just trying to cover anything and everything this time. I parked on the left side of my house, grabbed my things, got out, and started walking around to the front of my Jeep toward the home. As soon as I got out of the vehicle, I began to hear a clicking sound in my ears. But I thought it was just my sinus pressure or something at first, because it sounded like it was inside my ear canal. My girlfriend was on the phone, but she smiled and waved at me as I walked up. And it's at that exact moment when I looked up at her that I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I quickly looked over, and there it was, clear as day. Standing at the edge of this little patch of trees, per usual, as soon as I saw it, it saw me. Something very different that freaked me out about this encounter happened in that instant we first noticed each other. When the thing turned its head toward me and leaned back off of the tree a bit, I saw its arms were extending maybe 25 or 30 feet straight up the trunk of the tree and into some of the leafier branches at the top. This completely froze me in my tracks for a second, even after swearing that I would be ready for it the next time it showed up. Its arms were thin and filled with the same empty blackness as before. But they, like its movements, just didn't seem to be natural. Its arms were almost fluid-like in their motion, or slithering like snakes, sort of. It's so hard to explain because the whole thing never does seem to belong in its surroundings at all. But again, the way it moves its body really just doesn't line up with the way it's shaped. I'm still not sure if it's its actual motions of the thing or it's the lack of any three-dimensional form, but looking at this thing is so disorienting. It's hard to tell what it's doing when it moves, how big it really is, or even how far away it is. I could only be for sure of its location this time because I know where the tree is that it was standing against. This all happened in about 3 seconds, and just like every other time, I have a brief second or two where my brain is just unable to process what I'm seeing in front of me, even though I've seen it before several times now. It was just so much creepier this time, with those crazy arms, like a demented, evil little inflatable tube man, which I'm sure sounds funny until you've actually seen it. I hadn't gotten a look at this thing so clearly since the first time, and it's been so long since that the memory of the first encounter has slowly started to fade away. It was roughly the same as before in shape and size, but no eyes this time at all that I could see. Yet again, I am struck by how incredibly dark this thing is. Every time that I have seen this thing, it has been as if I have spotted it doing something that it should not be doing, although now I don't believe it was as surprised as it seemed to be to see me. If it weren't for the jarring and bizarre sight of its long, clumsy arms, I might have reacted quicker. But I did all right at the time, I guess, possibly because when I saw it standing there so plainly out in the open, a weird sense of validation came over me. At that moment, right then, I was so totally sure I was going to get a picture of it, or that when I yelled to my girlfriend, she would then turn and see it standing there as well. I didn't react that way. I did the previous times for sure because I dropped my tool bag on the ground and went running into the backyard at a full sprint while yelling my girlfriend's name. I guess I didn't seem excited enough when I called out her name because my girlfriend just held up the wait a minute finger while slowly and casually standing up off of the swing bench to try and see what I was running towards. I reached for my phone but immediately realized that it was in my backpack that I had just dropped, which caused me to briefly freeze and almost go back for it. But then I kind of just double-clutched the decision instead and took off running after it. I honestly thought I had a better chance of getting to it than getting back to my bag, digging out my phone, and then running over to get a picture. I legit thought I was going to catch it, but I never got anywhere close to it in the end. Stupid, I know. Get your camera out, you idiot. Also, in case you're wondering, I have no clue what I would have done if I had gotten up close to grab it. Well, I must have lost sight of it for a split second during the brief pause because I can't remember how it got into the next position I saw it in. But it had somehow now gone from having its head turned toward me and standing on 2 legs to being down on all 4s, bounding away from the tree and back into the brush. It happened so fast it was like it didn't turn or move to be facing the other direction. It just all of a sudden was facing the other direction in a different shape, moving a totally different way. I was about 15 feet. I'm a bad judge of distance away from it as it ran off and just kind of disappeared behind some bushes, just like when I saw it across the field in front of my friend's house. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but from this encounter and the previous one, I got the impression it was more comfortable on all 4s. I couldn't hear any sound at all coming from the creature via vocalization or interaction with the environment. Possibly I didn't hear anything this time because of the tapping sound in my ears, or perhaps it's because there was a lot of action in my neighborhood, and it gets a little noisy. I didn't follow the thing into the woods because simultaneously, when I lost sight of it, I also got distracted by the sight of something up in the tree out of the corner of my eye. When I got to the tree, I looked up just in time to see both of the thing's arms slithering back up the tree, moving like a tape measure made of black spaghetti being retracted back to its holster. It looked like it had either detached its arms or ran off without them, or even maybe that there was another one up in the tree that had been reaching down to it, which is precisely what I thought was going on at the time. For a brief moment, I even idiotically felt that I had cornered another one of them, if there were any more up in the tree, and that I might also catch it somehow. Regardless, at this point, I'm now standing at the base of the tree looking up the tree trunk, where I saw its hands, which I haven't seen it have any other time, with slender fingers tapping on the high branch, making a typing motion as if it had a keyboard on there. Up there, sitting on the tree limb. It was then that I realized what the sound in my ears were. It was the very distinct sound of typing on a keyboard, although the noise in my ears was not any louder now that I was closer to the tree than when I was across the yard. The noise wasn't loud in general, but it sounded like it was inside of my ear, and it sounded familiar, like the keyboard on my computer inside the house. Obviously, this last statement may be me overthinking, but at that moment, I felt like it was a memory of a sound of me typing being replayed in my ear rather than a noise coming from an outside source, if that makes any sense. It happened so fast again, and after just a second or two, its arm slid up behind the bottom of the branch as its hand simultaneously stopped typing, and pulled down behind the top of the same tree branch, where they both disappeared completely. The lack of shadow and depth put against something that does not reflect light is a difficult thing to explain until you've actually seen it. It makes it near impossible to tell distances or what direction anything is moving. So it is almost looks like it's always coming towards you or going away from you. As soon as the arms and hands were gone entirely, I briefly checked behind me to make sure it wasn't still there, and gave a quick look around the trees for the time being, making sure to keep aware of the treetop area, but I never saw anything again. I then turned back around and walked around the tree a couple of times. Saw nothing up in the sparse covering of the tree provided. I checked all around and even threw some rocks up there to see if I could get something to move around, but obviously nothing. The sound in my ears stopped as quickly as it started, and I knew then that this thing was gone. By this point, my girlfriend had hung up the phone and was standing in the doorway to the porch shouting at me, asking what's going on. And I'm now down in the backyard wondering how to explain it. When I asked my girlfriend if she saw it, her response was those two deflating words, "Saw what?" It made my heart sink so low because I knew it had just happened again. It was right there and apparently caught in an awkward position, yet seemingly nowhere to go. My girlfriend was right there for validation as well, I thought, and yet again got nothing. I explained it away as saying that I thought I saw a black bear, but it must have been a raccoon. And my girlfriend shrugged it off quickly enough, only after giving me crap for throwing rocks at what I foolishly told her was a raccoon. Not only is this thing incredibly frustrating with how it continually is able to avoid giving me proof, but the whole scenario just made me feel like an idiot. I feel like it tricked me for some reason, but I don't know why. Which in itself is also eating me up inside. I've gone over trying to piece together the specifics of each event, as they are all so similar in so many ways, but so different in others. The arms, the flashing eyes, turning into a dog thing, the sound it made. I mean, what is it all? I have absolutely the slightest clue of what that thing is. It sounds kind of like a crawler. Yet, how it kind of changed into that dog-like creature is very strange as well. I think the best idea or kind of explanation this fella has is some sort of interdimensional rift, or rift that he passed they just simultaneously keep passing each other. Something that I've been thinking about lately is, what if these kind of rift dimensions or portals to an alternate dimension, what if they're real, and what if everything that is here is there but just different? Wouldn't it be crazy to later learn that what he was seeing is actually him in a different interdimensional kind of world? Imagine how much that would mess with you. That'd be insane. Anyway, wow, that's just crazy. All right, my friends, that is it for today's first part of the uploads. I hope you guys enjoyed these as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. Definitely terrifying. I am kind of wanting to know what more that last kind of creature is. It's pretty baffling. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you for all your support, and may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.